Abba, Father, thank you for this opportunity to learn more Erectology, to unlearn the inherited lies that we grew up with. And please, as you already have blessed us with all this teaching and recordings, and people that will be listening later on, and please just help us to really hear and see what we need to today. Be with everybody, whether they're suffering a loss or if we're rejoicing. With one rejoices, we all rejoice. When one's suffering, we all suffer. But thank you very much for making this technology available so that we can fellowship today. In your name, amen.
Amen. All right, shalom, everybody. I'll see you. We're going to turn off the cameras as Kurt requested, and we'll see you in a couple hours.
Okay, thank you.
So here we have the 1st of January, 2023, just for a timestamp. The poster, calling it the Yhuh Echad poster. Kurt, did you put this up in the chat room or make it available or something?
No.
No, I sent it to you a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, but that's still a no. I didn't do it.
Okay. Anyway, this says Yhuh Echad. So that's the Yhuh Echad poster. It's 10 inches wide, and that's probably 3 feet. I've made mention of this a few times previously. This just became available in terms of doing some refinements to it. So Kurt can put this up in the chat room also, but if we go to Erectology Prints, PRINTS @gmail.com, that's an email site address. My friends Pete and Diana up in Kalispell, Montana, there's a print shop that has refined this and make it available. They can send that to you. That's the same place to get the chart with the vertical stripes. It's called the chart, and the array with the black border and all the pictures of the different fonts. That is the card set. So what we're going to talk about, I'm going to explain this chart a little bit, but in the bottom left-hand corner here is a list of words, which I was going to talk about today. I'll explain what the whole chart is. And
okay, it's now in the notes.
It's down the notes. Thank you. So we've been talking about, up until now, we've been going through the study of the books of the minor prophets. And we brought up the concept that Yahuwah Zavot, as he calls himself quite often, he in Exodus 3, when Moshe said, "Who shall I say sent me?" He said, "Tell him Ehyeh sent you." Well, tell the leaders of Israel that Aleph, Hey, Yod, Hey, Ehyeh, or Yhuh, sent you. But then he says, Yahuwah, Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey, a different spelling, is his Shem of Zakar. When I say Shem of Zakar, the word Zakar, as we went through, like the book of Zechariah, means to remember, to stick in your mind. It's masculine. So remember one time somebody said, an Israeli lady said to this friend of mine, "Hey, how do you know it's a he?" You know, this gender-specific pronoun attributed to the Great Spirit. It's like, oh, gee, how do we know that? Because the word Zakar means masculine. So when he said Yod He Vav He is his Shem Zakar, it's his masculine, you might almost call it a surname or a family name. So we've brought up the question, well, is Yod He Vav He the name of the father, like you might call somebody Bob or Jim or Yeshai, you know, a first name? Is Yod He Vav He the first name of the father? And then is Yeshua or Yahusha the first name, Christ being the second name? Haha, that's kind of a joke. That was never a name. That was a description of a concept like the word avatar. You know, the movie Avatar? the concept of Christ or Christos is kind of like this avatar concept that was already kicking around in Greece back in the day. And I remember there's a kind of a riddle came up on the internet a few years back. It says, were there Christians before Jesus Christ? It's like, how could there be Christians before Jesus Christ? It says in the book of Acts that at Antioch, that's where the believers, the taught ones, the disciples, the Talmudim of Yeshua, were first called Christians, because the term Christian already existed. It's those who believe in the Christ concept. So yes, there were Christians before Yeshua was even walking around. It's all how you define your terms. So we've talked before also that Martin Luther, the guy who was responsible for the initiating the Reformation from the Catholic Church Protestant movement, wrote a song titled "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." It goes on to say, a bulwark ever standing, which is a defensive, you might call like a siege works, a barricade against the assaulting enemy. Lord Sabaoth, his name, from age to age the same. Lord, and then I remember in the hymnals, Sabaoth, Lord Sabaoth, his name. What the heck is that about? And I've asked people, that was back when I was a kid, back in the 1960s or something. And it's like, what does that mean? Well, people think, well, maybe it means Lord of the Sabbath. Well, why didn't he say Lord Sabbath, Lord Sabaoth? So we've discussed before that that's actually a transliteration, the writing from Hebrew into, Martin Luther was German, so did it go through Latin and Greek and German and coming up into an English hymnal spelled S-A-B, Sab, A-O-T-H. Well, Sabbath would be S-A-B-B-A-T-H, and what's the O-T-H? Well, so if we're studying the spelling of words, so the O-T, ot, or ut, is the plural. It's the feminine suffix is ut or vav tav. The masculine suffix is yod mem or im, like seraphim, cherubim. The im is the Hebrew plural. So if somebody says seraphims, talking about those flaming angels, that's adding a double suffix of plurality. So you've got the im, which is the Hebrew plural, then you've got the s being the English plural, just so you know what's going on with the language. So the idea that you've got Sabaoth, so the Vav Tav, if you look in Stones to Knock, you'll see that they pronounce the final Tav plural suffix as an S, not a T, but sometimes it's a TH. So if you have, for example, you might see the name of a church or synagogue or something as Bet Amet, house of truth. But other people might pronounce it Bes Ames, still the same word, or Beth Emeth, B-E-T. So the Tav can be literally transliterated into English as either the S, the T, or the TH. It's just, that's what people do. So just to not confuse you, because you might look at these things and say, how do they come up with these ways of speaking? Well, the point of this is the word Sabaoth. If you have no reference to Hebrew, you might think it's Sabbath, but that's even a Hebrew word. And so how do you know? Well, I'm telling you, it's Zevot, Zadi Bet Aleph Vav Tav. So the Vav Tav is the plural, the ot, but the Zadi then being so we have Samek, Ayin, Pei, Zadi, Kuf, Reshin, Tav. So in the English alphabet, you have like M-N-O-P. There's no Samek. The Samek didn't transfer into the Latin, the Greek, and the English. Well, it was in Greek, but not into the English. And then you get O-P-Q-R-S-T. Well, that's the ending of the Hebrew alphabet, but the letter Zadi never made it into the Greek, Latin, and English. So what do you do when you're trying to transliterate the letter Zadi? It's either T, I would write it with a T with a lowercase z, capital T, lower z, or maybe just the Z, but that's technically the Zion, which got turned into the letter G instead of Gimel. There's all these interruptions or interplacements. Or it became an ST or a TS, or just an S, as in Sabaoth. So Zadi Bet, Zev, TZB, you might, or TZV, because the bet can be both the B and the V sound, Zev Ot. So is it Zev A Ot, or is it Zev Ot? We're on Skype, yes. The word Zavah, and Kurt, I sent you 6 pages of notes, and this is talked about on page 5. The word Zavah, if you look in the dictionary, Zadi Bet Aleph. Well, when you have a 3-letter word and the word ends in Aleph, according to the dictionary, that's kind of an Aramaic thing. The Aleph is almost like one of those neutral sort of wild card, in the sense, like I've said before, you can add yods and vavs in between the other letters, put them in, take them out. Doesn't really change the essence of the word. So if you add an aleph at the end, that doesn't necessarily change the essence of the word either, especially if it's a 3-letter root. So what's Zadi Bet? Well, Zadi Bet is turtle and covered wagon. Why would Elohim, Yahuwah, use the word turtle and covered wagon, Zadi Bet, as his great name? Yahweh Zavot. When he uses this word Zavaot, it's translated Lord of Hosts or Captain of Legions. But the word Lord and the word Captain or Master isn't there. That's completely plugged in by the translators on a whim. It doesn't even exist. Yahuwah Zavot. So this 4-letter name, the tetragrammaton, tetra meaning 4, gramma, where we get the word grammar or writing, we get the word graphic, tetragrammaton, 4-letter, the sacred name. Nobody's supposed to know how to speak, or if they do, they get in big trouble. There's a law against it in the Jewish world. Why does he call himself Zavot? Zadi Bet, well, Zadi Bet Aleph is army, but Zadi Bet is a turtle or a covered wagon. So if you think of a lizard and then a turtle, the back is a big thing that's a mast that's inflated. If you think of a flat trailer and then a covered wagon, well, that's inflated. So this, on this page 5, it says up at the top here, Yahweh Zavot Yhuh Israel. That's the 4-word reference of himself that he uses quite often. So the word Shmo, Shin Mem Vav, that's a carryover from what I was writing on the tail end of page 4. So in English, we have this expression, Joe Schmo. If you don't know somebody's name, you don't care who he is or what he's about, he's just some old Joe Schmo. Joe would be one of the more common English names that doesn't really mean anything as far as anybody knows. Then you've got other particular names, Ringo, Paul, George, John, the names of the Beatles and, whatever, Paul and whoever's names. But Joe is just kind of almost like this old Joe, just kind of a throwaway word. And Schmo rhymes with Joe, but what the heck is a Joe Schmo? It's Hebrew. The point is, this is all Hebrew stuff. So the word Shmo would be written Shin Mem Vav. The Vav suffix refers to the possession of the one that the word is about. So if the word is Shem, then Shin Mem Vav means, if Shem means name, Shin Mem Vav means his name. So when you say Joe Schmo, oh, what's his name? That's literally what it means. Only the word Joe doesn't mean what? How would you write the word Joe in Hebrew? Well, the letter J and the letter Y and the letter I in English are the letter Yod. And then the O sound is the Vav. So it would actually be Yod Vav. Yod Vav, Shin Mem Vav is how it would be Yo Shmo, but well, what does that mean? Well, Yod as a prefix means he will. So that's like a very particular intent referencing third person. And then the Vav is, you might say, the third person reference. I've seen Vavs translated in the scripture as actually second person and third person, meaning sometimes it's translated you, sometimes they, sometimes he. It's not necessarily a static reference. It could mean these different things, but it's referring to the one who's doing the action. So, well, there's no verb. There's a prefix and a suffix, but where's the actual word with Yod Vav? Trying to tell you the analysis of the word. So if you basically says, he will his, if the Vav is the suffix means his, and the Yod is the prefix means he will his. What does that mean? Well, that means he's all about what he's about. What is he about? His name, Yo Shmo. What name? So if you look at the word for Shem, Shin Mem, it means name, fame, renown, reputation, place. So the word Shem sometimes is translated as the word here and sometimes as the word there. There's other words that mean here, but I'm just saying, when you see the word Shem, it's not just name. And we're talking about this poster, which is Yhuh Echad. It's all about his Shem. It's where we're going. I'm trying to build this concept of how is the universe even built? What is it founded on? Going back to this concept that we talked about a few weeks ago, the Amad Basodi, which is in Jeremiah 23, where Yahweh says, these guys have dreams and visions, and they're talking about that, but does anybody ever even mention my Amad Basodi? Did they ever stop to think about what is that? So that's what we're talking about, the Amad Basodi. I did a little sticker many years ago, and it said, Chesed, Leolam Vayed, which is tender loving kindness forever and ever. And then it said on the bottom, universe construction. Universe construction, hence the hard hat and safety vest, gear. What's the universe built on? What's it got to do with his name? Well, this Yod Vav, the Yod is this strong right hand that you use for holding a hammer, or it's like an excavator arm digging a hole in the ground. It's a building tool. It also grabs hold and claims it. And the word kana, kuf nun hey, literally means the one who builds, thus owns. So he's the maker, thus the possessor of heaven and earth. Kuf nun aleph, which would be kind of looks like it should be pronounced the same. Kana is more like kane. The aleph is silent as in an eh. He calls him, that's his great title of himself, Kana, El Kona, jealous, powerfully zealous over his own stuff. And he actually, I forget where the verse is, but he said, he's looking, his eyes are constantly looking across the earth throughout the generations, looking for somebody, some human who will be equally zealous, interested, passionate about his stuff. Hence this channel, this YouTube study, we're trying to explain why we ought to be and what the essence of what it looks like to be zealous about his stuff. So the idea Joe Schmo or Yo Shemo is that he himself is actively engaged, that's the Yod, with passionate interest, kana, of his own intellectual, brilliant, genius ideas. That's the word het shin bet, chashav, which itself also means a band or a girdle. So we've talked before about when you see the picture of Yeshua that John talks about in the book of Revelation, I think it's chapter 3, where he's dressed in white and he's got this gold sash. Well, is it going around his chest this way or is it a sash this way? whatever it is, but why is he wearing that? Because that's the meaning of the word Hetchin Bet, an ingenious arithmetic device, like an abacus, like a computer. It's like, hey, I've thought this all out, put it all together, and it works, man. This is such a big deal, such a great idea. That's what the word Hetchin Bet means. That's what this golden sash literally is speaking. So we were talking about how you'll see a picture of something and say, well, it's just a description. It means something, like the folded napkin headpiece when Yeshua came out of the grave and they found a folded piece of cloth. Well, that's a statement. That's a communication. It's a message. Yeshua wearing the crown of thorns, it's a message. It's one of the words in the bottom left corner of this chart that we're going to discuss in a few minutes. So the concept of he will, Yod prefix, as he maintains by his arm. He's all about this stuff. The occupation of all his concerns is Shem. You'll see in the Klein's dictionary the word designation. Well, that's something that you designed and appropriated or placed a very particular value to. That's designation. It also means cattle brand insignia. So to think of the Aleph Tav as a graphic, or the Nun Samech, like here, as a graphic, or the menorah as a graphic, like a cattle brand, something you'd heat up and mark your stuff with. That's all Shem. It also means existing. So we talked about the concept of building a consciousness. And last week at the in the after show, we were discussing this. What's the difference between a thought and a consciousness? And talking with Gilin there, my personal take on it is that the consciousness is like this tower, that you could go up and get this panoramic view of what everything looks like and how it all fits together. But the thoughts are the bricks or the stones by which you build the tower to get there. So the idea of being able to see how is the universe built, not just what are the mechanics, which is mathematics, chemistry, physics, and then the functions of that with life imparted, which then you get into what you'd call biology or biophysics. Not just the overview, but the step-by-step building. Each piece that builds that consciousness. Well, that has to be the Hebrew alphabet letters, because that's the fundamental building blocks of the universe. That's where it all starts, going back to John 1:1, going back to Genesis 1:1. And so this phrase, Ahmad Basodi, which if you look at this chart, it's the very last thing written is Ahmad Basodi, which literally means, because the Ahmad is standing columns, talked about in Jeremiah 23, and the Basod, or the word sod, means hidden or secret or foundation. Ba is a prefix, bet, yod, the suffix, yod suffix means my, possessive. Bet means in the condition of, or bet is a suffix, we've gone through this before, it means in, on, with, among, through, or against, or for the value of. So the Ahmad is like standing columns, like you might see at the Parthenon building in Greece, these big columns that are holding up the roof. In fact, the columns essentially are the structure. You don't even see the roof, but so that what you see are these standing columns in a row down all four sides. The building is the columns upon which anything else is referenced. The roof, what's holding it up, keeping those columns over centuries from ever falling, even given earthquakes and volcanoes going off. They better be on a pretty solid foundation. You can't see the foundation. So the word sod is the hidden, secret, can't see it, foundation, which holds the columns in their place, which is the evident upon which everything else is imposed the load upon those columns. That's literally what Ahmad means and literally what sod. So when Yahweh says, Do you know my Ahmad Basodi? It goes back to, how's the universe constructed? The Ahmad is built upon my hidden foundations. Pillars, that's Ahmad Sod, pillars fixed upon my counsel. So that you'll see in some translation that the word sod is not just hidden secret, but it's also secret counsel, what you might say in whispers. It's like only certain elite people get to have this information. So the fact we're talking about it and putting it on video kind of busts the plans of some people. Literally, this stuff is the stuff that is talked about by secret construction companies, people that do concrete stone masonry work, that kind of a thing. They don't want anybody to know what's really going on with these secret words. Hence the Zechariah, beginning of chapter 2, we've mentioned the 4 Hareshim, Het Reshin, Haresh, translated as tradesmen or craftsmen, metalworkers, carpenters, people working in pottery or digging, plowing. But it's people who are working in wood, pottery, or metal, carving in, gouging in. Well, what would you write? If you were going to ornament, if you're a worker in wood, metal, or pottery, and you're going to decorate something, you could either do graphics or you write letters. And the word Haresh also means silent, deaf, mute. Well, that means they're carving in words which can't be intelligently comprehended, like paleo letters. If somebody looks at the paleo letters and says, I don't recognize them, they don't look like modern letters. In fact, these letters haven't been used since 500 BC on the other side of the world. So if somebody wrote Paleo Hebrew letters, wood, pottery, or metal etchings, they would certainly be silent, deaf, mute, kind of creepy looking. It also means sylvan, mean like dark, thick woods, and kind of associated with magic arts or enchantments and incantations. And Yahweh is going to send 4 Hareshim to terrify the Quran, the horns, Kufresh Nun, the horns of the nations which have oppressed Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem so much that no man can lift his head. So what I'm saying is that there's something about understanding the letters that Yahuwah himself invented, gave to us, Paleo Hebrew letters, which are like cattle brand insignia, all of which mean something. Each one of them fit like columns, which are the evident, based on his sod, heart of his Shem, who he is, what he's about, what's the program, why is everything happening the way it is, why is the universe built as a macro version of the micro heart essence, this fractal pattern relationship, human consciousness, all built as a different sort of expression of the exact same pattern. So as we study this Paleo Hebrew, it's all the same thing. He designed it. He designated the 22 letters, their orthography, what the shapes are, what they mean, and the order that they come in. That's all got to be Yahuwah Zavot. So when you get Zadi Bet Aleph Vav Tav, the Vav Tav is a plural suffix, but Aleph Vav Tav, if you look in the dictionary, Klein's dictionary, which I have written up here on page 5, Aleph Vav Tav Tav means to signal. Mem, prefix, is the one who, Aleph Vav Tav Tav, is a signaler. And so looking at the dictionary, and you go, well, what's the difference? You kind of learn just from looking at the language how it all works. Shin Mem Aleph Vav Tav literally means assessing, valuing, or estimating. Well, that's the Shem of the Aleph Vav Tav. I can look at that way and say, well, that's the name of the letter. Assess, value, estimate. Well, that's what Erectology is. That's a synonym with Erectology. The word Memnun, Shin Memnun, and Ayin Resh Kaf are all synonyms of doing this task of saying, what are we looking at here? There's one other word that we're going to talk about on this list that means one who has eyes to see and actually sees, one who has ears to hear and actually listens and hears. And it's the word for an inspector, a supervisor. You have a crew of builders on a job site, and when they supposedly have gotten some work done properly, according to plan, they'll call in the inspector, whether he's from the city, the county, the state, federal, whatever, and he, or even the construction company itself, and he'll come and he'll check things over. Oh, it looks pretty good to me. No. Can he see what he's looking at and know whether it fits the intended plan, or did somebody make a mistake? Well, you got to not only be able to see what you're looking at, but assess it compared to what you know is the intention, the plan. And if you know structure and you look at something and say, like this house that I bought years ago, there was beams, but nothing under the beams to hold the beams up. Somebody, oh yeah, you're supposed to have one of those things, but they didn't remember these things. And gosh, the whole thing could have fallen down if enough load pushed through to break the shear load of the nails, because there was no post under the beam. What were those guys thinking? Well, they just didn't know. Foundation without a base underneath it's going to push into the ground. They didn't know. They didn't have an inspector. To be able to find your way around these letters to the point that you can actually say, I know what's going on. I see the way this works. I know that, or I believe that because Elohim Yhuh Is Echad planned these, well, you got to believe he planned it, or else now we're on some bogus fairy tale trip. To realize that because these line up with the Mishkan pattern, with all the stuff that which is his personal great ornamentation, the Mishkan, he showed Moshe the pattern in heaven and said, now you make the one on earth just like this. That pattern, the Tabanit, fits these letters. The Moedim, these are my choice best treasure, my bejewelment, my ornamentation. This is my best stuff. Lines up with the Moedim, which orchestrates the letters, which is why Christmas, Easter, New Year's, Halloween, whatever, totally different calendar, totally different culture, totally different nonsense, bogus reference of nothingness. But Yahuwah's stuff, now that's the somethingness. That's the stuff that really exists. That's Shem. It's the truth of what really exists. So then you got the first 7 days of creation. Why did he do it in 7 days? Why not 3 days? Hey, the Trinity. Why not 22 days? No, he did it in 7. Why 7? Talked before. It's because the meaning of the word Shavah, Shin Bet Ayin, 7, or Shin Bet Vav Ayin. Because the word 7, one of the words also on here, top of page 4, the word 7 means vow, oath, curse. Satisfy the vow or you get cursed. Fulfill, complete, surfeited. When the curse is full, then it can be alleviated. If you commit a crime and have to go to jail for 10 years, when you've put in your time of 10 years, okay, now you can get out of jail. If he said, Leviticus 26, I'm going to multiply the curse by 7, Ezekiel 4, he said the curse upon the northern kingdom is 390 days, a day for a year, that's 390 years, and they didn't come back, then the curse is multiplied by 7, that's 2,730 years, from 721 BC to 2010 AD, which was this is now 23, so it was 13 years ago, the curse was fulfilled, and so we have free legal right to come back. So when he says that the measure that Elohim uses is, now this is kind of like a code, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and overflowing. It's like, okay, well, if you're buying by a cord of wood, and it looks like what they did, there's this company that has a basket, metal basket, and they take a loader and they just dump the logs in. Well, they get stuck on each other. Oh, it filled up the basket. That's a full basket. If you shook that thing and moved it around, that would be about 2/3 full. That was kind of a rip-off quantification. Not real happy about that. If you're desperate and you got to have the wood, you take it anyway, but I'm not going to go back to those guys. But Yahuwah, man, he's the opposite. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, overflowing. Well, that's also then the meaning of 7, or the meaning of Shin Bet Ayin. full, complete, surfeited. Surfeited, that's a strange word we don't really use, but it's like the surf at the beach. You got the water, you got the foam, the waves are bubbling up and overflowing. You pour an ale into a cup and it overflows with the foam and you fill it up. So then you have the full volume of the liquid, what the client, the customer is paying for. Everything else is like this excess. That's the picture. That's 7. So if you have Shin Mem Aleph Vav Tav, assess, value, estimate, you got to know, what am I even looking at? Okay, if Zadi Bet Aleph is an army, that's swelling up. 1 or 2 men don't make an army, they can make a squad. But when you've got 100 men, 1,000 men, a field of, now you've got an army. So that's like a lizard compared to a turtle swelling up. Aleph Vav Tav, it's the last 3 letters, but Vav Tav is the plural. But because of the way we study, we can look at Aleph Vav Tav and say it's a signal. Look in the dictionary, Klein's dictionary. Aleph Vav Tav literally means a sign, a signal, symbol, token, miracle. What's a miracle got to do with those other things? Because a miracle is a sign of something. The crown of thorns, it's a symbol of something. It's not just a crown of thorns. It's not, hey, we're going to mock you, this guy pounds the thorns. It says something. It's an Aleph Vav Tav. But Aleph Vav Tav also means to consent or agree. It's pronounced ot, but because the Tav is pronounced as an S or a TH, it might be os, or it could be pronounced oath. Oath, well, what's an oath? Like a vow, like the number 7, it means 2 or more people have gotten together to agree to terms and stipulations as a contract. And it's symbolized by every one of the letters of the alphabet. So every one of the letters of the alphabet are then points of a legal binding contract as an oath. And every letter is a sign, a symbol, and a signal. If you look at Aleph Vav Tav and say, well, that Vav is a connector, like a bridge or a link or a holding together, a pin, a nail. Aleph and Tav without the Vav, look that up in the dictionary. Now, when Aleph and Tav by its own self as a word exists in the scripture, no definition. It's not even translated. Sometimes you'll see Aleph Vav with a hyphen, and now it's what they call the mark of the accusative. Like if it was this man in particular, Zion, there's 2 ways to say the word this. It's either Zion Hey or Zion Aleph Tav. Za or Zet. Zeit, like the zeitgeist means this ghost or this spirit, the spirit of this age. We talked about that film before, the video. Zion Aleph Tav pronounced Zait, or does the Aleph have a pronunciation? Za'ata, maybe, or Zat. Anyway, it means this, then the Aleph Tav, so it would be Zet et Ish, this man. So when Pilate said, behold this man, essentially when you're reading the letters and say, hey, wait a minute, Hey Vav Zion, hey is to reveal, to enlighten, say, look, the one that you can see, that the bright shiny, the crown of thorns, the one bedecked with Roman weapons, lashes and pierced and wounded with the weapons, but they also stuck a robe of state on him and put a scepter in his hand. Look at the king of the Jews. He was adorned with weapons. That's by definition the Zion, and he's the Vav, which is the 6th letter. The Vav is the masculine suffix, so that's saying the man, and the letter Hey is the feminine suffix, but it means, hey, look, revealing, pointing, illuminating. So if you know the letters, Hey Vav Zion is, look at this man adorned with weapons. So when Pilate said, behold this man, in Latin, ecce homo, in Hebrew, it might have been hine, behold, ha-ish, the man, or hine za-ish, or hine Zion Aleph Tav-ish. For him to say, behold this Zion Aleph Tav, well, the letter Zion is the 7th letter, so it brings us back to the word Sheva, which means to swear a vow, or the curse you get for not fulfilling the terms of the oath. He was put to the weapon killed, and then thrown into the tomb dead. Behold this man. So people who have a hard time with the Jesus factor, Zion Aleph Tav, Hey Vav Zion, that's him. That's the time, that's the guy. And for Pilate to declare it becomes Roman history. It's got to be reckoned with. It's a sign, it's a signal. So I can sit there and say, well, wait a minute. Why didn't they recognize him? Oh, guess what? The word spelled Bet Gimel Dalet in Hebrew, letters number 2, 3, and 4, literally means to be incognito, to be camouflaged, not clear and evident, but cloaked. It also means to deceive, beguile, betray, act treacherously, sneaky like. Well, Aleph, prefix letter, I am or I will. So in reference to the one speaking or projecting or telling us a story based on the alphabetic letters, if we start with Aleph, that means I am. I will. Who's I? The guy sending the message, whoever that is. How many of you up there are there? I don't know, but the one communicating references himself by the Aleph. Bet Gimel Dalet, well, not only does Bet Gimel Dalet mean to deceive and betray and beguile and be sneaky like, but Bet is to be put into material form, whereas Aleph is this idea, this concept, this identity and intent. Bet is material form, like in a body. Gimel is to travel, the voyager, the ambassador, the emissary, the one going back and forth, the camel. And Dalet is a door. Well, to be born on the face of the earth is a door. Hey, oh, there's the feminine suffix. So it's born through the woman. So I, the immaterial one, intending the transmission of the Aleph Bet communication, somehow, and however is up to him, but somehow he intends to put himself into the material cosmos, Bet, voyaging from the heavenly dimension to the earthly via the vehicle of being born of a woman and appearing as the Vav man, who would then be put to the weapon, slain, but done spectacularly because of the vow, because of the oath, the curse that his people imposed upon themselves for the sake of not keeping the vow that they swore themselves to, and then Het thrown into the tomb. Het is an enclosure. It could be a castle, it could be a pasture, it could be a prison, it could be a garden land, or it could be a dungeon, or it could be a grave, a sepulcher. And it just so happened 2,000 years ago in that place of the world, then the way they did things threw them into a sepulcher, which wasn't necessarily a grave per se. It was a hole carved into the rock, and then they would roll a stone in front. Well, there's your Tet, that which is round. Tet's not a snake, but snakes have a tendency to coil, which looks round. Well, so is a tire on your car round. It doesn't mean Tet's a tire, but it's something round. But Tet also means a full basket. So you could say, when you're thrown into a sepulcher, a tomb, and the round rock rolled in front, and then a pin, that's like a yod. It's actually a vav, a pin, a 1 inch round and about a foot long, from what I understand. They would drive it through the one rock into the other so the wheel won't roll off for any reason. That's what the Romans did when they put Yeshua in the grave. Well, there's the first 10 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And I'm saying this because people have asked, hey, where's that video, or where's that thing where you're talking about the meaning of the letters? It's here. It's this video. It's this chart. So what I've done on this chart here, Aleph, sourced from Hashemayim, the heavens beyond the scope of the cosmos. Well, that's what Aleph is. It's ox. Forget the ox. Forget the pictures for a minute. It's the concept of, if Bet is the material cosmos, and Bereshit 1:1 starts with the letter Bet, and it's drawn extra large. Where's the Aleph? The Aleph is referenced as the causal agent who got it here, whether it's Martians or beings from beyond some other, we don't know. It's invisible and silent. Aleph is a silent letter. So whatever, wherever, whenever was the beginning of what? Of this. So this is the bet, the bet of the Bereshit. So bet is materialized embryonic form, the one including other. What? The one including other? Well, the one is the Aleph. But if Aleph's all by itself, then it's Echad. It's singular. There's no conflict. There's no other opinion. There's no other expression. It's just itself. Nobody to say, hey, why don't we do something? Or let's do it together. Or, hey, I don't like that idea. Or let's do it later. It's like, there is no other voice. Echad means it's just it. So all of a sudden, for there to be a bet, then it's like, well, now Aleph has a place, or Aleph has a reference. If you look at a single cell organism, how does it reproduce? There's no other by which for it to reproduce. So some creatures have been made, the hydra, the earthworm, single-celled, what, a paramecium maybe, or single-celled organisms, they'll just all of a sudden do something called mitosis where they separate. Now there's two of them that look identical. When there was one, there was only one frame of reference all the way around its environment. When you have two, suddenly they're the same, except they're not the same, because this one has reference of that one, and now that one has reference of this one. So other than their consciousness, they refer to the other, and they're not the same ever again. There's never again any echadness. So the word echad, does it mean singular, one and only? Or, I mean, I have over here the Shema, Deuteronomy 6:4. Shema Israel, Yhuh Eloheinu, Yhuh Echad. It's translated typically, listen or hear Israel. So he's talking to a very particular people group. Yahuwah, the word Eloheinu means our Elohim. So he's identifying the name and the relationship, our champion, our provider, our God, as some people say. Yahweh, and then the word Echad, only, singular, one, no other. Could mean unified. That's the way it's typically translated. Why this is called Yhuh Echad is the name of this chart poster, is because I'm suggesting that we don't really get what the word Echad means. And if you listen to the Shema, imagine, most people have never heard the Shema in Hebrew.
Shema Yisrael, Yahuwah Eloheinu, Yahuwah Echad, Ve'ahavta et Yahuwah Eloheka b'kol levavaka, uv'kol nafshaka, uv'kol me'odeka. Ve'hayu hadevarim ha'ele, asher anoki metzaveka hayom al levavaka, ve'shinanitam levaneka, ve'dibarata bam, ve'shifteka, ve'vteka, uvlekteka v'derek, uvshakbeka, uvkumika, uk shartam leot al yadeka, ve'hayu le'todefo, ve'nineka, uk tavitam al mezuzot beiteka, uvshe araka. Hallelujah.
They might have heard Adonai or Hashem or the Lord our God, the Lord. That's not what it says. What he said was, and remember, this is in Deuteronomy 6, Moshe speaking. But when Yeshua was asked, what's the greatest commandment? This is what he quoted. So Yahusha, made a really big deal about this sentence. If you say it in English, Greek, or Latin, or some other distortion of the Hebrew, it's just not the same. Imagine hearing this for the first time, these words in Hebrew. Shema Israel, Yahuwah Eloheinu, Yahuwah Echad. Now you've heard it. Question is, what does it mean? So I'm suggesting that he didn't just give us a trinity. He didn't just give us a one singularity. He gave us a factor of 22. And it starts with the Aleph. and then goes into bet. And because there's a bet, never again can the one only reference itself. It must reference the other, which is why bet as a prefix means in, on, with, among, through, against. In the condition, it's one thing in reference to another thing. So bet by itself, by its use, tells you what it means. It's not just house. What's a house? House is something that you make. House is something that you're either in or out of, or you learn the ways of. So the more you contemplate how this place is built, because house is the universe, house is our body, house is a car, house is... The more you contemplate, the more you'll see what he built is clearly referenced by everything around us. It's obvious, only we can't see it because we don't know that we're even looking at anything. Then Gimel. Gimel is technically the word camel, but voyager on a mission of experienced liaison, transport, experience. Well, if bet is just to exist as a static object, bet in motion, doing something, is now having an experience. Boomerang back and forth again. Forth and back and forth. In other words, just not back and forth or forth and back. It's repeatedly. It's like, well, wait a minute. Camels go back and forth. It's called the ship of the desert, the truck on the highway, breathing in and out, Gimel. But what's the dynamic relationship tethering to each other, Aleph to Bet? Well, if Aleph is a singular entity, thought, anything, and it makes an other, it's like launching some spaceship into orbit. See you later, maybe. So you have the people doing astronauts doing spacewalks. They've got this hose hooking them, chaining them, tethering them from the mothership to the spaceman, breathing tube. It's like a umbilical cord. They could also bring him back, like having an anchor on a chain. It's a connection between. But if Elohim says, "Hey, it was me, Echad, but now I made this other, and poof, he's on his own." Well, what's the connection between them? Volitional choice? Well, how do you know there's any connection? Maybe there's no connection. So Gimel represents the connection between the bet and the Aleph, even though it comes after the bet. It can only come after the bet because you don't need a connection with Aleph until you've already been designated as different and alienated and individualized from the Echadness of Aleph. So then it's an interesting thing to see that setup between Aleph, Bet, Gimel. It can be read in sequence. The consciousness of myself, embodied, there's the noun, and then the noun in motion, Gimel, going somewhere. Where are you going? Wherever you want. As soon as you're going, you got to make a decision. That's the dalet, the door. So not only can you read these letters in a sequence of this, then this, then this, then this, which is, you might call it what people call Greek linear thought, but you can say, if Aleph and Bet, the Gimel talks about what's between them, then Dalet talks about what's between the Gimel and the Dalet. And then Hey talks about what's between the Dalet and the Gimel. And Vav talks about what's between the Hey and the Dalet. It's just, that's a whole nother part of the study. But what I'm saying is that there's more than one way to regard how the letters relate to each other, but they very specifically do. So if Gimel's between Aleph and Bet, but Gimel hasn't existed yet because Gimel exists after Bet, what happened for Aleph to make a Bet? So the word meta, M-E-T-A, means a change in state or condition. So if Aleph is the echadness, the oneness, the state or condition of singularity, and Bet is otherness, multiplication, plurality, how does singular become plural? What essence is happening? That's the meta. Well, this was going to be called the meta chart poster, and then Facebook took the word meta and ran with it a couple years ago, so I changed it to Yahweh Echad. But on the chart, which is the, I thought I had one here. Anyway, you know, the big chart with the vertical stripes, right in the middle of that, in the pastel colors, is these words, meta. So these are my subjective analysis of the in-between each of the two letters. And I've tried to color code them in a spatial reference of, so this meta element, variegated as a spectrum. Well, if Aleph is 1, how does it become bet? It's kind of like white light. So for you shine a white light through a prism and you get it variegated, you get a rainbow spectrum. So it's broken up into different things which can be identified. Soon as it's identifiable, it's now in bet format, because Aleph is silent, immaterial, bet is material and specific. So to take white light, which is why this is written in white, and say it could be broken into a spectrum, which is why all these other ones are in color, until you get down to Tav, it's also white, which brings it back up to the Aleph. I'm just saying there's a graphic reason behind all this. So to say somehow this Yhuh Echad determined to put himself into a variegation. Father and Son, it's only 2, but that's still a variegation. It's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, 3. Oh, hey, that's a Christian Trinity. Well, that's a variegation, but what about 22? Maybe there's actually 22, not just 3. What? That's heresy. Well, no, that's just something they didn't think about, but we're thinking about it. So if bet is materialized, 5 minutes, if bet is materialized, embryonic form, then for the Aleph to say, I'm going to make a universe, and then I'm going to become an embryonic form in that materialized form in the materialized universe, the cosmos, that's Aleph and bet. So between Aleph and bet, from infinite essence, he took on finite or finitude, the finite, the form. That's how Aleph became bet. What about bet becoming Gimel? Suited up, so bet is taking on this body to enter the playing field. It's like, if you're going to play football, you better get your gear on, engage the game action, which he designed. Human life on earth. Gimel, between Gimel and Dalet, cutting all ties, burning the boats, no bridge for which to escape, win or fail. Well, there's this phrase, the Vikings, when they landed on shore, sometimes they would burn the boats and say, listen, nobody's getting out of here. It's do or die. We're either going to conquer the land we're invading, the enemy, or we're dead. Either they're going to die or we're going to die. It's kind of like Moshe or Joshua taking the Israelites into the land of Canaan filled with monsters, filled with castles and giants, and they're going to eat us. And Yahweh said, wipe them out. And I know some people don't like that story. Some friends of mine are repulsed by the hideous beastliness, the monster God of the Old Testament killing thousands and millions of people and sending his people to do the dirty work. God is love, and they don't even want to hear or think about the fact that there's all these Bible stories about how many people he killed. It's repulsive to them. But is it the truth? Not my God. Well, the God Yhuh Is Echad apparently will do that. And when he sent his people in, he says, you guys are not going back to Egypt, because the people kept saying, look, we don't like this option of lifestyle. Let's just get out of here and go back to Egypt. Right out of the gate, they wanted to go back to Egypt. Numerous other times, some of them went and he says, you go back to Egypt and you're all done. That's it. We have a one-track, one-way mission. No going back. When you turn to seek Yahuwah as your Elohim, you better not look back. Look what happened to Lot's wife. And Yeshua even talked about that. He made reference, forget where it was, but he made reference of Lot's wife looking back. That's not an option to us. So we're going to take a break here. I'll just say one more thing. To look at Zadi Bet, Zev, which means to inflate, to swell up like an army. What has that got to do with the letters of the alphabet? If you think of the letter of the alphabet as just, oh, there's that thing with a phonetic sound, that's one dimension. Oh, that's how you draw it. That's another dimension. That's a shape. Where does it play out in the where in the sequence order chronologically is in the alphabet? That's another dimension. It's arithmetic gematria value. That's another dimension. But to think that it can inflate with meaning, can inflate as one of his hosts, as if they were symbols of his military forces. And then if you look at the letter Nun prefix, Nun Zadi Bet, literally means to stand, stationed, placed, positioned, founded, appointed. It sounds like a Mad Basodi. Handle of a knife or sword. If you stick the sword into the rock like the Excalibur thing, it also is the word perpendicular, which is a synonym with Anak, Aleph Nun Kaf, which is the first word of the Ten Commandments, Anoki Yahweh El Heka. Verticality, perpendicularity, and it's a synonym with the word Amad. Placed, positioned, and standing, stuck in like a sword into the rock. Well, that's what he's done with these letters. Positioned the letters in order. And then if you look at Anak as a synonym, plummet, plumb line, to straighten, make straight, that's Yashar as in Israel. Perpendicular, verticality, and Anoki where you get I, ego, self. So it's again, by doing this little study of connecting synonyms, the meanings of the words, the pictures of the words, it all comes back to him describing himself. Him who? The Aleph. Does that mean Yeshua is Yahweh? Certainly the same family name, but if you go from immaterial to material, there's a distinction of severe regard when he says, don't make any image of any likeness and of anything in heaven, worship Elohim. So that's why we come up with the question, is it right that we worship Yeshua as Elohim? I know he came from there, but should we be worshiping this image, this bet form? He told us to worship the Aleph. And for that, we'll have to stop and take a break.